A number of you have requested a video on this, so in this video, we are going to be looking at the 3 details comprehension question, which can be found in paper 2 of the O-Level English exams. I'd just like to say thank you to those of you who have submitted your video requests. Please note that we do take all your requests into account, so do keep your video requests coming. Hi everyone, I'm Teacher Cheryl. Welcome to Cher's English Tuition. In this channel, we bring you mini lessons for secondary school English. If you want to stay on top of your English game, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you never miss out on any of our lessons. And if you find our lessons helpful, please give us a like and don't forget to share this with your friends as well. So let's take a look at what we will cover in this lesson. The first thing we'll look at is what question type the 3 details comprehension question is. Secondly, we'll do a quick review of the 3 steps to answering inference questions. Now, I have a few other videos on answering inference questions. You can find them in the description box below. If you haven't watched those videos yet, I recommend that you watch them first before completing this video, because in those videos, I go through in more detail how to answer inference questions using only 3 steps. The third thing we'll look at today is how to answer specifically 3 details questions using the 3 steps. Don't forget to look out for a bonus tip somewhere in this video as well. Okay, so what question type does this 3 detail question fall under? I call them content inferential questions. So content meaning that we pick out the content from the text itself, and then we have to infer and give a further explanation in our answers. So basically for 3 details questions, that's all we need to do. Pick out the content and give a further explanation. Now let's review how to answer inference questions. As I mentioned before, there are 3 steps. The first step is to identify keywords or ideas in the question. Step 2 is to understand the context and gather relevant clues. And step 3, we craft our answer. Once again, if you want a further explanation on these 3 steps, please watch my other video. The link is in the description box below. Okay, so how to answer 3 details questions? Let's take a look at a specific example, and this is taken from the 2016 O-Level Paper 2. Early that morning, Nair was surveying the view from his cabin window. There were many reasons to love the marina, he thought, like waking to the uplifting smell of the sea, which fluttered like a scarf around the boats and extended like satin towards the horizon. He loved spending the day in the fresh air, cooled by the wind, and watching the peddlers who wandered by, selling brass pots and cotton sandals from China. The question reads, at the beginning of this text, Nair is looking out of his cabin window at the sea. Explain how the language used in paragraph 1 makes the sea seem attractive. Support your ideas with 3 details from the paragraph. Okay, so we're going to start off with step 1, which is to identify the keywords or ideas from the question. The first thing I'm going to highlight is Nair, because in some texts there might be more than one character, and so I need to know which character to focus on. The second thing I'm going to highlight is looking out of his cabin window at the sea. Why I'm highlighting this is because it gives me a bit of the context so that I know where to pick out my answer from. The third thing I'm going to highlight is makes the sea seem attractive. And finally, 3 details from the paragraph, because I need to know how many details to give and also which paragraph to get the details from. Now I'm going to zoom in on the word attractive because I need to pick out content that tells me that the sea is attractive. So what does attractive actually mean? The Cambridge Dictionary defines attractive as something that is very pleasing in appearance or sound. So going back to the question, I need to pick out content that tells me that the sea is very pleasing. Okay, now moving on to step 2, which is to understand the context and gather any relevant clues. The first thing I've picked out is surveying the view from his cabin window. And why I do that is you realize that this matches with the question. The question states Nair is looking out of his cabin window at the sea. And this is the part of the text where Nair was actually looking out the cabin window, looking at the view. The next thing I've picked out is many reasons to love the marina. Now again, I'm going to look at what a marina is, and the Cambridge Dictionary defines a marina as a small port that is used for pleasure and not for trade. So if I zoom in on the picture that's been given by Cambridge Dictionary, you can see that it's kind of like a car park but for ships. It's a very small area with all the little ships, so I have picked out this sentence as a clue because it tells us that there are many reasons to love the marina. And usually when you love something, one of the reasons is because you find it attractive or it's something that's very pleasing to you. Okay, so because this is a content inferential question, we need to pick out 3 details. So the first detail that I have picked out is uplifting smell of the sea. The second is fluttered like a scarf around the boats. And the third, extended like satin towards the horizon. Okay, so now that we've picked out all the details, we need to craft our answer. Now for content inferential questions, there are 2 things we need to do. First of all, we need to analyze the keywords from the chosen detail, and then we have to link our answer back to the question. So let's go back to the 3 details that we have picked out. The first one is uplifting smell of the sea. So the word uplifting tells us that something encouraging, inspiring, or refreshing. So linking this back to the question, we can say something like the smell of the sea makes people feel encouraged, happy, or refreshed. So putting that into a proper answer, it would look something like this. Uplifting smell of the sea suggests that the scent of the sea makes people feel refreshed or encouraged. Let's look at the second detail, fluttered like a scarf around the boats. So the scarf is like a fashion accessory, usually to people, but in this situation, we can say that maybe it's a fashion accessory to the boats. And the writer says that it's fluttering like a scarf. It's not flapping violently in the wind, it's fluttering. So it's kind of drifting very gently around the boats. So our response could be something like this. Fluttered like a scarf around the boats suggests that the scent is gentle and comforting, drifting around the boats. And the third detail is extended like satin towards the horizon. Now think about satin. Satin is a material that's very smooth and very soft. So it's saying that the scent is something that's very smooth, very soft, and probably very calming, and it's going out towards the horizon, out into the sea. So again, my answer is going to look something like this. Extended like satin towards the horizon suggests that the scent is floating smoothly and calmly away out to sea. So let's take a look at a second example. This is taken from the 2020 O-Level Paper 2, and I'm going to read the passage for you. Tilly and I followed Mrs. Morton down the high street. She sailed like a vessel along the pavement, skirting around the pushchairs and people who had stopped to wipe ice cream from their babies' chins. The holiday had found its fiercest day yet. Even so, there were those who still nurtured mistrust. We walked past raincoats bundled into shopping bags and one woman who carried an umbrella wedged into an armpit, like artillery. The sky was ironed flat, and even the clouds had fallen from the edges in the faultless blue above our heads. And the question is, at the beginning of the text, Mrs. Morton is taking Grace and Tilly to the library. Explain how the language used in paragraph 1 emphasizes how hot the weather was that day. Support your ideas with 3 details from paragraph 1. So what I would like you to do right now is pause this video, try to answer the question using the 3 steps that we have just talked about to craft your answer, and then share your answers in the comment box below. Okay, so I hope you've done that. Now let's go through the question together. In step 1, we have to identify the keywords and ideas in the question itself. So the first thing I've identified is Mrs. Morton is taking Grace and Tilly to the library. Again, this tells us a bit of the context and where to find the information from the text. The second thing that I have highlighted is emphasizes how hot the weather was that day. And finally, I've highlighted 3 details from paragraph 1. Okay, moving on to step 2, we have to understand the context and gather relevant clues. Now I've highlighted this Tilly and I followed Mrs. Morton. So this tells me that Tilly and the writer are going somewhere with Mrs. Morton. So this matches the question because the question tells us that Mrs. Morton is taking Grace and Tilly to the library. Okay, so now let's look for the 3 details. The first one that I have found is the holiday had found its fiercest day yet. The second one, the sky was ironed flat. And the third one, the clouds had fallen from the edges in the faultless blue. Okay, so now that we've picked out our details, let's craft our answer. So starting off with the first one, the holiday had found its fiercest day yet. So this tells us that during this particular period, it's probably the holiday period. For example, maybe it could be the Christmas holidays. And it must have been very hot throughout that season. However, this particular day was scorching hot, and it was the hottest day during the holiday period. So my answer would look something like this. The holiday had found its fiercest day yet suggests that the heat was so severe that it was the hottest day during that holiday period. The second detail is the sky was ironed flat. So I want you to think of this. When we use an iron, we normally use an iron to iron our clothes, and we do that to flatten out any wrinkles. So here, the iron is used to compare to the heat of that particular day, that the heat was so scorching hot that it seemed to have flattened the sky. So my answer is going to look something like this. The sky was ironed flat suggests that it was so scorching hot that it seemed to have flattened the sky, like how clothes are flattened by a hot iron. So the third detail is the clouds had fallen from the edges in the faultless blue. So imagine this, the faultless blue means the blue had no fault, it was a perfect blue. That means the sky was most likely devoid of clouds. There were no clouds in the sky at all. Now, one thing that clouds do is to protect people from the heat that's coming down from the sun. So in this detail, it's saying that there are no clouds in the sky, so therefore there's nothing to protect people from the heat. So my answer would look something like this. The clouds had fallen from the edges in the faultless sky suggests that the sky was completely devoid of clouds to protect people from the relentless heat of the sun. Okay, so hopefully you managed to get something similar to my answers. Remember, the 3 steps are: identify keywords and ideas in the question, understand the context and gather relevant clues, and finally craft your answer. But for content inferential questions, remember, when you are crafting your answer, you need to analyze the keywords from the chosen detail and then link it back to the question. And here's my bonus tip for you. The common issue with this type of question is that students usually give a very generic answer, or their answers overlap. So what you need to try to do is to focus each explanation on something different. Alright, so what we have covered today is the 3 details question type, which is content inferential. We've also reviewed very briefly the 3 steps to answering inferential questions. We've also looked specifically at how to identify 3 details questions with some examples from the O-Level past year exam papers. And I've given you a bonus tip there. So that's all for today's lesson. If you found this video useful, please give it a like and subscribe. Most importantly, please leave a comment below if you have any questions about this lesson, and also feel free to send us your video requests. See you in the next one. Bye!